G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome back to another video. And here we go with more daily racing. So from the previous video, we have the same combination here, which is Bathurst in Group 3. It's a daily race A from a week ago or so. And these are the last two races that I did of the week. So we had some interesting from the back action in our previous video. We're going to pretty much continue on, however we have now set a qualifying time. I don't recall if I actually set that qualifying time in the previous video. I think I may have. Not a particularly quick qualifying time, I believe it was a 2:03 or something. But anyway, we jump into the action here where we've planted ourselves in P2 on the grid. And we've got Dags 18 behind us, who's currently only 2/10 behind, so he was looking pretty good to actually get a move done up into turn 2 here. The car I'm driving today is the Nissan Skyline Super Silhouette, which is the newest addition to the Group 3 category. However, it's a little bit of an older spec car. It's actually an old Group 5 car, but it happens to sort of make the correct performance figures to be able to fit neatly into Group 3. And I think it's an interesting addition. It offers some unique strengths and weaknesses which aren't typically exhibited by some other Group 3 cars, namely a H-pattern gearbox, an actual H-pattern. So I think like there are some other cars that have a stick shift, but this car actually executes a manual gear change with clutch like the road cars do, or like some road cars do in this game. So it makes me a little bit vulnerable on the exits of corners. It's also got absolutely astronomical turbo lag, which means you can't actually really get away with doing the trick of using one higher gear on the exits of some of the corners, because the power when you get the throttle down is there's just nothing until you get into the upper echelons of the rev range. But in line with that, we are going to struggle on the exits of the slower corners when we've got to exit in second gear, much like the other cars. However, we have the slower gear changes. But throughout this lap, we'll get to the bottom of Conrod Straight here, and you'll see that I actually start to gain plenty of speed. But I make a massive mistake here, just graze the right rear on the grass in the entry to the chase, which is probably the hardest braking zone on this track. And I end up for a little excursion out onto the grass verge at the bottom of the chase. So I'm trying to touch some grass here, but yeah, I'm not choosing the best moments. I'm going to have to go defensive into the final turn. I've got dirty tyres as well, and then we just have Phoenix 500 completely capitalise on that little bit of a mistake that I made there, which is obviously no good. We now find ourselves dropped into 4th after comfortably residing in second position for the majority of the race. That gap to the leader is up to 6.5 seconds. I was really looking to try and chase down that leader and try and steal a win from second on the grid here, but yeah, unfortunately, just making that mistake and not quite getting into the rhythm that I would really like to be in, and it just means I'm not really able to do too much. My dirty tyres have cleared at this stage, but now I'm unfortunately behind Phoenix, who obviously, having qualified ahead of, is probably a little bit slower than me, and I'm probably going to get held up in this mountain section here. Phoenix runs quite wide there. He's driving the Ford Mustang, which does have a traditional racing gearbox, so he's going to be a little bit quicker on the exits to some of the corners. I run quite wide heading into Reed Park here, and it just puts me slow across the top of the mountain. And as we head through the grate there, just take that curb at McPhillamy Park. No, that's not McPhillamy Park, that's Solomon Park. And it just helps hook the car around. We are gaining some time heading towards the S's here. The car feels nice and planted heading down the hill here. So a nice stable car is this Super Silhouette. We're going to have the slipstream of that Mustang heading down the lengthy Conrod Straight. I think we've got a total of about 1 kilometre of straight line running. I think the overall length from Forest Elbow to Murray's Corner is 1.9 kilometres, but we do have a corner, or we do have the chase in there, which truncates that a little bit, probably down to about the 1 kilometre mark. But we're half a second behind Phoenix heading down Conrod Straight here, and I did lose time on the exit of that slow corner as expected, but you can see I start to gain towards the bottom as we reach the top speed, which I have better of, if that was correct English. Straight down the inside, he doesn't really quite see me. He turns in and makes his apex and doesn't really account for me sending it down the inside. And I guess I did come from very far back, so I can't really complain too much about it. I think that particular moment there was as a result of simply my better top-end speed. He makes an absolute hash of the final turn, getting 2 wheels on the grass, spins him to the inside. He's going to have the inside for turn 1 though, except he brakes so late. I brake slightly early and get an absolute sensational undercut there, or overlap, or switchback, whatever you want to call it. So he runs deep, and I just take that opportunity to cut back up the inside. Cut back is the terminology I was looking for. But we get that beautiful run there, and that's Phoenix dealt with. So as we head down the S's here, look at that purple sector as we begin to flow down the hill, and I think that's the best description I possibly have for you, flowing down the hill here. Yellow flags out. Who's crashed? As we round turn 17, we find it's Miko Racer. He's getting a bit of a reputation for himself for crashing out of the lead. He did it twice in the previous video as well, and I think that's just cemented the fact that he's not doing particularly well for him, and he ends up quitting the race. So the gap to the lead, who is now Dags, has dropped to about 3 seconds, or 3.4. We're going to fast forward the opening stage of this lap a little bit as we head up to the mountain section, because unfortunately I didn't really gain too much on the straights, which is honestly where I am banking on the most to actually gain time, because I have better top end speed, but I just simply wasn't able to gain. So the top of the mountain is all I really have left, and this car is pretty good across the top of the mountain in my experience. I was able to gain quite significantly, probably because it was quite comfortably all 4th gear, so I wasn't really mucking around with the slow gear changes. But let's flow down the hill one more time. We're probably a little bit wide heading through turn 11 there, and it just puts me a little bit off. I think I was 2.4 seconds heading into the dipper, and I'm now it was 2.5, but it's dropped down to 2.3 as we get a better transition into the turn-in point for the Forest Elbow there. But we are going to gain, or we're going to lose time rather. We're going to lose time initially out of that slower corner. That gap is down to 2.5 seconds. So barring any errors from Dags, I'm probably not going to be able to get this win here. But let's see if we can gain anything in the braking zone. 2.3 coming into the braking, and that drops down to 2.2 on the exit here. Once again, just losing a little bit of time out of that slower corner there, but that's 2.2. We did gain a little bit in that braking zone, but as he absolutely nails the final corner, there's not really too much I can do in the way of actually taking this position from him. So unfortunately for me, it is going to be a second position, which is where I qualified, but I finished behind a driver that I should have been ahead of, simply because I made a mistake. So for me, that was that win down the toilet, because I made that massive error in the opening of the race. So no good, really no good there. A little bit disappointing. My team seems to be pretty happy about it, however, but as for myself, I know what went wrong there, and I'm just going to be planning on not replicating that again. We join the next one, and there's a new group of names. So Dags isn't here, Phoenix isn't here, Miko Racer isn't here, but who is here is Saint Nickel, or ST Nickel as I usually call him, an old friend. A guy I used to race all the time in GT Sport, and I haven't really seen him for a few months at the opening of GT7 here, and then I stumbled across him in a daily race. So, hello, ST Nickel, lovely to see you again. And we're just going to have an absolutely beautiful race here on our home turf. We've got Clandestine Kiwi behind, who is looking pretty racy at this stage, actually looking to get an overlap up the outside here, heading into the chase. It's not going to be any good. He runs a little bit wide. I nail the apex, get on the power nice and smoothly, and Clandestine Kiwi falling to about 7/10 behind. But now that we have released that pressure from behind, I'm not at an immediate risk of losing a position. I will only be at risk of losing a position if I make a mistake, which obviously by accounting the previous race is quite possible. But at this stage, that gap 1.1 seconds behind, the gap to ST Nickel ahead is in fact the gap that's coming down, which is in the correct direction for me. We get a pretty good downhill section. He's 6/10 ahead of me, or 5/10. We're actually gaining some time as we head down the hill towards the ever-important Forest Elbow, because it leads out onto the longest straight of the track here. A little bit of oversteer out of the exit there, and ST Nickel's going to gain initially, and that gap, that gap, which was about 0.4 of a second, is now opened up to about 7. So I'm really probably not close enough to actually make enough gains at the bottom of the straight when I achieve my advantageous top speed in order to get this move done, although there's a massive pace disparity there. So that tells me, or lets me know, that Hyundai Genesis that he's driving isn't exactly the best in terms of straight line or top end speed. So that gives me a little bit of an advantage and lets me know that the part of the track that ST Nickel is weak in is the chase, and that is down to his car choice, not necessarily his skill as a driver, which is quite high indeed. So we're just going to be looking out for the chase and just waiting for the chase, because one thing I take note of when I'm racing another driver 1v1 like this is I use the laps I spend behind them to work out where they're weak, and then I try and improve that part of the circuit in order to create the biggest skill difference, or not even skill difference, just pace difference. Basically, I'm just looking for where they're weak because I know that'll be the easiest part of the track to get the move done. And it's given in this particular instance that that part of the track that ST Nickel happens to be slow on is also a straight line. Just makes it really easy to get the overtake done. It does mean that I have to be patient, stick behind him, but I can afford to be patient here because Clandestine Kiwi, which is the immediate car behind me, that would be the one to take a position off me if I do find myself going a little bit too conservative, is 2.1 seconds behind. So I do have a bit of a margin here, and I can afford to make a couple of attempts and not have them work here, so that's lucky that we have that slight gap behind. So that Hyundai Genesis is proving to be pretty good across the top of the mountain. I'm not really all over the back of him. I'm right on the back of him, but I'm not feeling as though I'm being held up at this stage. As we head down towards the Forest Elbow here, let's see if we can get a better exit. Let's see if we can not get the oversteer that I got last time. Don't hit the limiter. That's a much better exit that time. And I think that's one of the better exits I find myself ever having had in this week of Daily Race A. But now we're firmly in the slipstream, 3 tenths behind now, a lot closer than the 7 that we were last time, and we're gaining so quickly here. Look at this pace difference, straight down the inside, hit that curb there, a little bit unstable, and let's hit the brakes for the chase. Oh, we don't quite make the apex there, we just go a little bit deep there, and we don't get the best of exits here. And I find myself 2 wheels on the grass, ST Nickel straight back down the outside. Does he get this move done? He does. Oh, he kind of does. We're still side by side on the exit here. I have to make sure to leave him space, but as I execute one of the slower gear changes, ST Nickel is able to keep that position as it stands currently. So one more time circulating around the circuit, just using the slipstream of this Genesis, but look at that, he drives away every time I make a gear change. Another gear change up into 4th, and he's driving away. I've got one more gear change to do up into 5th. I'm starting to gain now. It just slows down the progress as I make that final gear change there, but the mountain straight here comes to a close soon enough such that I'm not actually able to get any overlap or any definition up the inside. But here we go on the exit. It's got to give me the outside for the cutting here, and it's really not the place I want to be. I backed out of that quite significantly because I know I've got Conrod Straight coming up, which is a much easier place to get a move done, and I knew I had margin behind, so I can afford to slow up and just back out of a move across the top of the mountain here. So all I've got to do is make sure I remain close enough such that I can be right in contention to grab this position. That's really all you're looking for, is just making sure you're close enough at the best part of the track to overtake on. But it does mean I have to not make mistakes across the top of the mountain. Same goes for ST Nickel, because if he does make a mistake across the top of the mountain, you will probably find yourself in a barrier, and that is probably even easier to get the move done that way if your opponent crashes. Look at that bit of Motorsport 101 here. But we get a pretty good Forest Elbow there, another decent exit, about 4 tenths is the gap here, with the assistance of the slipstream and learning from last time. So I went deep at the chase last time, so I know I've got to brake earlier using all this slipstream from ST Nickel. We got to pick a slightly earlier braking point. The car's also got tyre wear and it's full of fuel in the race here. So let's hit the brakes just on the 150 meter board. Do we make the apex this time? We don't actually touch the apex, but we are a lot closer to it than we were last time. We don't actually graze the grass on the outside of the chase there either. I found this car a little bit understeery, so it was quite easy to actually get 2 wheels into the grass on the exit of the chase, because you really want to keep the throttle pinned, but the car can understeer out towards the outside. That's the current fastest lap of the race, 2:04.4, and that's the move done on ST Nickel. So we've just got to consolidate on this lap now, just consolidating what we know. I know I'm a little bit vulnerable on the shorter straights, but I'm good at the end of the straight, and I'm decent across the top of the mountain, and maybe without a car ahead of me, I will make that job a little bit easier to try and keep an eye on my marks and make sure I don't make any mistakes. Nice and tight there, and we get on the power nice and early, and we actually have gained time through there. But we basically just got to keep it under control, got to make sure he doesn't get a move done, because ST Nickel, he's quite a skilled driver. I used to race him quite a lot back in GT Sport, you know, in FIA and daily racing, and I just haven't seen him. It was actually really nice to stumble across an old friend, and we've pretty much resumed right where we left off. He's had a faster qualifying time than me, so he has pace around here, but in the race, the car feels very different. Like I said earlier, full of fuel, which you don't have in the qualifying session, because all of the daily races in GT7 actually use fuel, so you have 1 times tyre, 1 times fuel on daily race A and B, just so the car is actually kind of semi-realistic, I guess, as realistic as Gran Turismo can be, but it does mean the car feels heavier, it's a little bit more cumbersome in the turns, and it doesn't quite accelerate or brake as quickly as you'd like. But as we've been talking about those dynamics, look at that gap, it's up to 1.2 seconds. A couple of people leaving the race. We're down to 9 races, which is rather small. I think that was another thing, another criticism that is common about GT7 is that the grids are just too small, and yeah, look, a couple of people quit a daily race and you're down to less than 10 drivers, which is a very small field. I would like to see a good solid field of 20 drivers, but I don't know, maybe it's more down to the number of players in this Oceania region here, which admittedly is a lot smaller than the amount of players in EMEA or North America. But let's follow on this lap. This is going to be the last lap of this daily race for this week, so let's do a little bit of a track guide. For turn 1 there, we have driven past it, but I was actually using the end of the pit building on the left-hand side. In GT Sport, you had a nice photographer in a green high-vis vest standing just after the 100-meter board, and that was always perfect, but that photographer is gone, or is not reliably standing there, so I used the end of the pit building. Coming up into turn 2, braking just, about halfway along that little bit of concrete on the outside after the 100-meter board. I think it's actually the entry to a driveway because this is technically a street circuit. Coming up into here, lifting through turn 3, and then pretty much jumping on the brakes right on the apex of 3. Nice and gentle through turn 4. Make sure you find the inside at turn 4. There's a load of camber there. Turning in on the tree on the outside, you may need a slight feather of the throttle to get through there decently, and then it's pretty much all flat out. Slight lift as you bottom out on the grate there. Use that curb to help pull the car, and then lift off the throttle as you head over the crest at McPhillamy Park. Grab that curb on the inside because it helps pull you around the corner, and then braking just as you head under that Audi barrier, that Audi sign rather, and then just modulating the brake all the way down the hill. Short shift up to 3rd on the exit of the dipper so you avoid a nasty gear change there, and then lifting off and just gentle on the brakes heading into Forest Elbow here. You're of course completing all these little twists and turns as you're trying to get on the brake, so you've got to make sure not to exceed what the tyre can actually do. If you're 100% braking, you can't do any turning, so in order to get a little bit of turn in, you have to leave some margin on the table in terms of the brakes. So earlier braking and gentler braking is the secret to getting through there fast. Look at that, 2 tenths purple. Let's head down into the chase, looking on the right-hand side, just after the 150-meter board with no slipstream. We meet that apex beautifully hard on the power because we have a gear change to do. It's really paramount to actually get onto the power early in this car. We've only got one more corner to do, and it's braking just before the tree on the right-hand side. Find that apex nicely on the power. Don't touch the grass on the outside. Accelerate up towards the line, and it's a 2:02.8. You may have briefly seen that flash up on the screen there, but a 2:02.8 is a pretty fast race time there, and it was actually the fastest lap I was able to do in race conditions for the entire duration of the week. And that was good enough to consolidate that victory there to a 2.2 second margin to ST Nickel behind. We get a 2-star result there, fastest lap, clean race, absolutely beautiful, up 1 position. The only thing we didn't get was the pole position, but I think ST Nickel can proudly have that one upon his shoulders. But look at that, absolutely beautiful racing on offer here. Home circuit, new car. It was a pretty good race this week as well. And then, of course, stumbling across ST Nickel pretty much just by fate. Obviously, was not a planned rendezvous with ST Nickel there. And we managed to just have an absolutely fantastic race there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in the GT World Series and resuming more excellent racing. But if you did like this video, do hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more, do hit the subscribe button, and you can probably just flick that bell on so you get notified as well. That's not something I usually push, but I think it's probably pretty good. If you want to make sure you don't miss when I upload the video, that's what the bell icon is for. You can leave a comment as well, as I always appreciate any questions, comments, and constructive criticism. But as for this, it's going to be the end of it today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.